Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It is my great pleasure to welcome Majid Daneshgar, who is a research associate at the Seminar of Oriental Studies at the University of Freiburg. We are really still called that. He completed his PhD at the University of Malaya in Malaysia with Professor Andrew Rippon, after which he worked as a lecturer in New Zealand at the University of Otago for 4 years. And thereafter he came to Freiburg, first on a fellowship and now as a researcher at my institute, which I'm very happy about because of his broad and transregional research interests, which include Qur'anic exegesis, method and theory in the study of Islam, and especially Islam in the Malay-Indonesian world. He has published 2 monographs, studying the Quran in the Muslim Academy, which is quite recent, just published last year, and a monograph based on his PhD thesis on Tantawi Jauhari and the Quran. And he has also edited or co-edited 3 volumes. One which is particularly pertinent to the topic of this talk is the Quran in the Malay-Indonesian world, which was co-edited with Peter Riddell and Andrew Rippon. His topic today is Persian Shi'ism in Malay-Indonesian Qur'anic commentaries, which is an interesting topic because it sounds quite counterintuitive. Because normally we tend to think of the Malay-Indonesian world as a region that is firmly Sunni, and also a region that is beyond the Persian cultural influence, which is usually thought to end in South Asia somehow. And Majid will offer some thoughts about this, which I'm very excited about. So yeah, Majid, why don't you start by telling us where this interest comes from?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Johanna. Thank you very much, Peter and others, for joining me. Yeah, I became interested in Persian Shi'ism and its role in the Malay-Indonesian world when I was in Malaysia. When I was taking some courses on Bahasa Melayu, as well as writing about tafsir, modern tafsir, mainly focusing on Tantawi Jauhari and the way his ideas were introduced in the Malay-Indonesian world. And I came across that the commonalities between Iranian communities and Malay communities both were interested in Egyptian commentaries in the early 20th century, and they both translated Egyptian tafsir or Egyptian commentaries on the Qur'an into their own languages. And I found some sort of commonalities, and after that I became more interested in Malay culture, and I saw that plenty of terms and works which were already popular in Iran were also popular in Malay-Indonesian, like hikayat, like even some Quranic commentaries about which I will talk today. So let's share the screen and start the, okay. Okay, part 1, this talk will be divided into 4 parts. The first part is about the first part is about Persianate and Persian Shi'i commentaries on the Quran. I wanted to say that when we say Persian Shi'i or Persian Shi'ism, we should take into account another notion, which is very popular these days, even it's more popular than before, is Persianate. And what do I mean by Persianate and then Persian Shi'i commentaries in the Quran? So when we say Persianate, the main element which play a crucial role in the notion of being something Persianate, Persian material or Persian language, the Persian manuscript or Persianate thought is the language of Persian, is the Farsi or Persian language. So it is very important to know that the language play a crucial role under the canopy of being Persianate. Then we have Persian Shi'ism. This is what I classify, and I would tell that why I want to revise earlier literature. So we have Persian Shi'ism, which deals with the origin, like racial or national identity. Someone can introduce himself as an Iranian or as a Persian scholar or Persian, and then also practice Shi'ism. So this is about the origin. And the other aspect of Persian Shi'ism deals with the language. Someone writes something in Persian or in Farsi, on the other hand using Shi elements. The notion of Persian Shi'ism at the outset was presented by a Dutch scholar, Peter Weth, who extensively wrote about the Malay-Indonesian world and their race and their religion and their culture. So in 1888, he used the title of Persian Shi'ism. And I recently, when I was for the first time translating something from in Dutch to English for the first time, so I came across this one. But when I was writing the article in 2014, I was not aware of, Weth article. And so I used the Persian Shi'ism to classify these two types of, the terms of origin of Persian Shi'ism and the language of Persian Shi'ism. Okay, so in the context of tafsir, it's going to be more clear. So Persianate tafsir. So according to a current idea, Persianate were going to be from 900 until 1900. So until early 20th century. So many centuries. But I would say that it doesn't work for tafsir, at least for tafsir or other Islamic sciences. Persianate tafsir from 900 until the emergence of Safavid Persia. I will talk about it soon. During the Persianate word or Persianate tafsir, they will come all sorts of tafsir. They also sorts of their sectarian coverage was open to all sorts of ideas and approaches like Sunni, Sufi, Shi'i, and Ismaili, and so on and so forth. And their languages were mainly Persian. There were sultans or kings who supported such tafsirs, but also religious figures themselves. But a particular form of study is needed in order to reach a concrete conclusion. The main specification of such sort of tafsir is the Persian language. There are plenty of works which have been, which were produced at that time. Some of them were examined, some of them not examined. Like one of the most famous, which I think deserve more attention, is Tafsir Charhi by Yaqub Charhi from Ghazni of Afghanistan, which was very popular at his own time, were translated into different Islamic languages. And we have other form of tafsirs we have in Persian before the Safavid era. With the emergence of Safavid period, very early of 16th century, we have a form of Persian Shi'i tafsir. They paid particular attention to Shi'i elements. The language also, they produced Arabic works, but also they were, they tried to promote Persian calligraphy, Persian scripts as well. The works were supported by courts as well as by ulama, and also the main specification of this category was the Persian language, Shi'i identity, and desunnization or desunnifying. This is for the first time that they try to clearly in their commentaries on the Qur'an marginalize Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah in their commentaries. The second phase of Persian Shi'i tafsir happened during the Qajar period. They were more flexible. They cover Shi'i and Sunni and Sufi, and the main language was even Persian. It was clearly supported by Qajar kings, particularly Nasr ad-Din Shah, and by ulama. And also the main specification of this period is that the translation to Persian, Qajar kings and Qajar ulama became very much interested in what is going on in European context, and they became even interested in tafsir translation from different languages. Even they became interested in the translation of Malay-Indonesian works because they were already read by European scholars. So they welcome all sorts of translations. They copied and printed the different Quran commentaries, classical ones particularly. The next phase is Persian tafsir during Pahlavi period by Shi'i and, they welcome Shi'i and Sunni, even the language was Persian. Mostly ulama or religious figures became interested in this topic, and they started to translate classical works into Persian, and also edited some important classical tafsir like Tafsir al-Tabari again, and was a very important period of time for editing manuscripts. The last part is Persian Shia tafsir. After the Iranian Revolution of 1979, particular attention was paid to Shi'ism and Shi'i commentaries and Shi'i elements. They also published and produce Arabic tafsir like Tafsir al-Mizan, which was very important. But anyway, Persian tafsir became really popular, and after that, it was highly supported by government and as well as the Hausa. And the main features of this period is that they try to revive Safavid tafsirs. So the reproduction of tafsir from Safavid period, as well as this time against earlier tafsir that translated from Persian into other Islamic languages. Before last periods, it translated from other languages into Persian, but after the Iranian Revolution, it was changed and they highly translated tafsirs into other languages. So this was about the first part of my talk.
Okay, so the question that we are all interested in now is, how did this material come to the Malay-Indonesian world?
Yeah,
and was there maybe also a reverse movement? Because I mean, we tend to think of these transregional relations in terms of reception, like of Middle Eastern content in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
But maybe you can tell us a bit about whether there were any reverse movements.
Yeah, very interesting and good question. This would be related to Persian. We need to go first to see about the Persian tafsir in the Malay-Indonesian world, the way Persian tafsirs made inroads to the Malay-Indonesian world. So let's start with this manuscript. This manuscript, I found it in the University of Leiden library, which I think we can call it the oldest Malay Qur'anic commentary from the 16th century. And it's going to be even older than the Cambridge tafsir, which was already introduced by Peter. So it has a specific elements which need to be demystified. First of all, this is a trilingual tafsir. Trilingual, and even it is a three-layer Quranic commentary from Aceh. It was found in Lampisang, and it is the verse 88 of chapter 27. You can see it starts with وَتَرَى الْجِبَالُ تَحْسِبُهَا جَامِدَةً, and then we have a mystical translation. It is not a literal translation, but it is a mystical translation. And then we have a mystical interpretation. And blah blah. And then we have the next part of that we have Malay translation of not only the translation of the words kaulihat segala bukit pada bicaramu. So this is one, and then we have betapa akan dapat. We have the Malay translation of the Persian translation, and then we have the Malay translation of the Persian tafsir. Karena segala zarra itu ada. So we have this one. So this is a unique commentary, This is a unique manuscript of the Quran. And I think this is going to be older than what we so far know, that going to be early 17th century we have commentaries, Malay-Indonesian commentaries beginning of the 17th century. So according to what we found, the scribe was a Malay trying to learn Persian. According to the orthography, to spelling, the way he wrote in Persian and Arabic and Malay. So it is very clear that he was in Malay trying to learn Persian. And on the other hand, the Persian, at that time, we know that Persian was practiced and read in Aceh. There was largely plenty of people became interested in learning Persian. Their communication was in Persian, and many mystical or focused storytellers were impressed by Persian in Aceh. So what we can say is that Aceh, unlike what earlier scholars like Shahab Ahmed said, Aceh was a main part of the Persian world. The majority of the scholars, according to this map that I show, majority of the scholars, limited the Persian world from this part until the end of this South India and Sri Lanka, this region. But nobody really take into account Aceh and Malay-Indonesian words seriously. But this is despite the fact that Aceh produced plenty of material, like this one that I showed, in Farsi or Persian, and they were practiced. People were interested in explaining them, and not only read but also to produce some materials. So it tells us that this is the first sort of emergence of Persian materials in the Malay-Indonesian world and Persian Malay-Indonesian commentaries. On the other hand, we have emergence of Persian Shi'i commentaries in Nusantara or archipelago. So what Peter said, Peter already in his book, Malay Court Religion, Culture and Language, says that Aceh is the birthplace of the earliest Malay tafsir, like the Cambridge version, which you can see the picture now, the image, as well as Tarjuman al-Mustafi from the middle of the 17th century. So both of them were produced in Aceh. Given this, and on the other hand, I mentioned that in Aceh, people were familiar with Persian. Already they were impressed with Persian literature and mystical treatises. So how is it possible that we should not expect the influence of Persian tafsir? I went through different or various forms of Persian commentaries, and I came across an interesting point. Once Peter examined this manuscript of Cambridge, he mentioned that it was highly likely written based on Tafsir al-Baidawi, famous Arab medieval or classical Tafsir al-Baidawi. But there are some places that he couldn't find a prototype for them. What is the main source by which the author of this Cambridge version interpreted the words of the Quran? And then I came across the similarities between those verses or those interpretations with this famous commentary of the Quran, Tafsir Mawahib Aliyah or Tafsir Husayni. So it was written by Hussein Wa'iz Kashifi, who's a very famous scholar. Of course, he was not a part of Safavid, dynasty, but his works were really instrumental, used by Persian Shi'i of Safavids. And not only this book, but other works. And after that, Europeans became very much interested in his work and translated it into European languages. But interestingly, Hussein Wa'iz Kashifi's name and works were clearly cited in Malay works, like Taj al-Salatin, which was very famous, instructing kings, entitled The Crown of Kings. It was clearly mentioned the name of Wa'iz Kashifi. And on the other hand, they listed, George Werntley, the famous Swiss philologist, listed the name of Wa'iz Kashifi in his catalog, mentioned the Hikayah Sheikh Wa'iz Kashifi. So all these encouraged me to think that probably, or highly likely, Wa'iz Kashifi could have influence on Malay tafsir too. And when I compared, this is going to be my forthcoming article that I mentioned here. When I compared, I saw that the places that Peter could not find it, parallel in Tafsir Baidawi are found actually in Tafsir Mawahib Aliyah or Tafsir Husayni, which was very important and very instrumental and used a lot during the Persian Shi'i period. After Safavid, it became a very important tafsir material. So this is going to be, after that Persianate influence, this is going to be the first Persian Shi'i tafsir emerged in the Malay-Indonesian world. Do you have any questions? Yeah.
This is absolutely fascinating. I'm wondering why this is so little known and so little researched. Do you have any, obviously this is partly due to the fact that today we conceive of the Malay-Indonesian world as Sunni and only Sunni. And so maybe people won't really look into these works. And also, it's a linguistic issue. There are some scholars who read Malay languages and Arabic, but there are probably not that many who read Persian. But do we have any other literature on this or evidence of this connection?
To be honest, about the tafsir literature, I personally never come across any source talking about the historical relationship between Persian tafsir and Malay-Indonesian ones. But in terms of Persian, mystical treatises, mystical works, and their emergence among the Malay-Indonesian world, we have great works of Alessandro Bausani, the famous Italian Orientalist, was great works. I can say that he examined all sorts of Malay literature and connect the relationship between Persian and Malay. But in terms of Qur'anic commentary, this is also in the tafsir studies itself is a very new topic.
Yeah.
So just imagine the relationship, transregional understanding of Malay tafsir and its possible relationship with Persian Shi'i tafsir is a new topic too. And I personally couldn't find any, I mean, even in earlier literature on tafsir literature in Malay, I personally couldn't come across any, you know, strong or concrete debates about this issue. But I think in the future we should expect more because, you know, because of the importance of transregional understanding of Islam. It's going to be a more important topic in the future. Probably we have more studies dealing with Persian, Malay tafsir, these two. Okay.
There's a question from Sajjad. He asks whether Kashifi is really a Shi'i tafsir.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. It's according to what I found and I read. It is very hard to say that it was a Shi'i tafsir, but as I said, it was very instrumental for Safavids. You know, after it became a part of, you know, they ascribed it to themselves. They tried to show that it's a part of Shi'i literature, although he was not himself Shi'i. Even his Rawdat al-Shuhada, we cannot call it was a Shi'i work because it's full of, you know, non-Shi'i materials. But anyway, it is seriously used by Safavids or after the Qajar, even during the revolution in Pahlavi, as a main source of Shia source. Yeah, it's not a Shi'i material word, but is known as a Shi'i source. And, yeah.
Okay. There was also a comment by Saifuddin Zuhri who points out that there was even a dictionary of Malay, Arabic, Persian, and Turkish in the Aceh Sultanate. So this is a question. I mean, what you mentioned, like Shahab Ahmed's Balkans to Bengal complex, and it ends in Bengal.
Yeah.
So, yeah, why didn't he look further? I mean, why?
I don't know. I don't want to say it is going to be due to philological expertise. I don't want to say that, but probably he followed the footsteps of earlier scholars who thought that. So all of them limited to Sri Lanka. I mean, Southern India. I don't have any idea why he didn't go further. But what it is, despite the fact that earlier scholars tried to show that Persian and Malay had a close connection together until the 17th century, middle of 17th century. But yeah, but this is, I think it needs further assessment. I think we can find even the influence of Persian materials in Eastern Indonesia. I think it should go further east, but maybe in the future at that time to examine more, but yeah.
I love that your Google Maps map
how
many hours we need to walk from Tehran to Aceh. But anyway, go on.
This is the road that one work, for example, crossed ways, you know, until Lampisan. But it should be noted that many works, particularly this manuscript, is that of Fakhruddin Arabi, and I think this manuscript was, you know, widely circulated across India and then reached Lampisan. So it's not merely from Iran. So let's continue with the next. So sorry, the next part. The part 3 is about Persian Shi'i elements in Malay tafsir and a crucial question. So after the, you know, early middle 17th century, we have a long break, and we cannot see the emergence of Persian Shi'i tafsir anymore in Malay-Indonesian ones. First of all, it is because Malay-Indonesian world, mainly ran or led by Raniri, became very much anti-Wujudiyya or mystical movement of Hamza Fansuri, the people who were advocates of Persian literature. On the other hand, we have, for example, Qajar period Qajar kings and rulers became very much interested in translation of translating European works or the materials which were examined by European scholars. So we cannot see the influence of Persian Shi'i tafsirs, but Persian Shi'i elements in Malay tafsir emerged in the 19th and early 20th century, and that was a big question. Who is Dhul Qarnayn? And verse 83 of chapter Surah Al-Kahf, whether he was Alexander the Great or Cyrus the Great. So that was a big question. And it is the first time that the notion of Dhul Qarnayn as a Persian king emerged in the Malay-Indonesian world too. So who was the main theorist or the one who presented this idea? So it happened, or it emerged for the first time in South Asian commentaries. So first of all, we have, so for example, the first statement is the reference in the Qur'an in the history of Dhul Qarnayn is to Darius I, or Dariush Awwal, is presented by Maulana Muhammad Ali, the famous member of the Lahore Ahmadiyya circle, who was very famous in his interpretation and his English translation of the Quran with explanatory notes in 1917, was translated into Dutch and other Malay-Indonesian languages, although it was restricted and it was not easy to be circulated across the region, but it was very, people were familiar with it. And so it was the first step, that's the first phase that someone called Dhul Qarnayn could be a Persian king. So this is the first step. And then the next step, or the next phase emerged by Dhul Qarnayn was an honorary title used to praise Cyrus, presented by Abul Kalam Azad. He was an Indian activist and politician, also an mutarjim, the translator and interpreter of the Quran. In his tafsir, Tarjuman al-Quran, he clearly mentioned this issue and examined and said that Dhul Qarnayn was an honorary title used to praise Kurosh Kabir. So these are important and crucial questions, statements, because they are still popular in Iran and also in the Malay-Indonesian world. The Malaysian government supported directors and even some scientists and scholars, archaeologists, to go and examine who is Dhul Qarnayn, because it's related to their identity too. Two tafsirs, Malay-Indonesian tafsir I want to introduce now. One is Aqra al-Athir, which is a very interesting on-air or based on a radio by Sun Haji, originally Singaporean scholar, Mufassir, and he says that Dhul Qarnayn was Cyrus or Darius the Great, the king of Persia. He does not clearly mention his source, but according to what he says, we can conclude that he was referring to Muhammad Ali and Abul Kalam Azad. And the next tafsir is Tafsir al-Azhar by Hamka, global, quite a famous scholar, Indonesian scholar. And I think his level and his tafsir's level is same as Tafsir al-Tabatabai in Iran. He's very famous, Hamka. And he echoed what the Abu Kalam Azad said. And he clearly referred to the name of Abu Kalam Azad, that Dhul Qarnayn could be Cyrus or Kurosh Kabir. And but he does not refer to Abu Kalam Azad tafsir, but to his report published in a journal, in a magazine called Thaqafatul Hind, Culture of India. And yeah, so this is about what I wanted to say, that the long break was filled with South Asian scholars who talk about Persian Shi'i elements and identity of Persian, and then it was used by Malay-Indonesians too. Yeah.
But where's the Shia in all this? I get the Persian influence.
Yeah, but
what's Shi'i about identifying Cyrus or Darius as Dhul Qarnayn?
Yeah.
Are there any actual Shi'i elements, like, I don't know, reference to the Imams or stuff like that, or the Mahdi, or is it more like a Persian influence?
Yeah, even in Tafsir on Nur al-Ihsan, he clearly referred to the name of Mahdi. And but why I say Persian Shi'i, because we're at present people talking about Cyrus the Great, and its relationship with Dhul Qarnayn is very much attached to the statements of Tabatabai, Tafsir Tabatabai. He is known as a Shi'i tafsir, and he clarified and clearly referred to this point. And what I say is that the current understanding of Cyrus the Great and Zulkarnain goes beyond the Persianate something. It is very much related to Persian Shi'i because it is presented or echoed by Persian Shi'i thinkers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but the South Asians you cited, neither of them was Shi'i actually. I mean,
Of course
Muhammad
not.
Ali was Ahmadiyya.
Yeah, but very good point. But there's some, back first of ideas among Malay scholars whether they should admit it as an Iskandar, as Zulkarnain as Cyrus the Great, or Iskandar Alexander the Great. And when they consider these topics, it is mainly because they want to confront being known as a Shi'i or as a follower of Persian Shi'i tafsirs, because Persian Shi'i tafsir pay particular attention to these ones.
I'm not sure I'm entirely convinced, because
Okay.
I mean, if you had like a French national myth, for example,
Yeah.
and then you find that incidentally all of the French people who promote it are Catholics, would you then call it a Catholic idea? Or wouldn't you still call it like a French nationalist idea? I mean, this whole nationalist narrative about Cyrus the Great, etc. I mean, obviously, most of the Iranians who promote it are Shi'is, because most Iranians are Shi'is today, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a Shi'i idea. So,
I was thinking of this question before, but I know what you mean. I hear you, but I think currently the discourse of Zulkarnain as Cyrus the Great is very much Shi'i, popular among Shi'i debates, Shi'i commentators. And because of that, I said that it's going to be a Persian Shi'i element in the Malay-Indonesian world. But yeah, for the first time, South Asian commentators, when they mention this one, they mention it based on European discoveries, archaeological discoveries. Was based on mainly scientific issues, and they never were impressed by Persian Shiism. But after that, it became an instrument by Persian Shi'is thinkers. And anyway, but I agree with you that it's, at the first time we cannot say that it's a Persian Shi'i element. But I think that at present it is going to be a part of Persian Shi'i tafsir debates.
Okay.
Yeah, but thank you. Okay, and then the last part of this presentation is about pre- and post-revolutionary Persian Shi'i tafsirs in the Malay-Indonesian world, which is going to be a bit different from earlier generations or phases. During Pahlavi dynasty, the culture, we have more, the Pahlavi dynasty paid particular attention to cultural connections because they wanted to promote the significance or dignity, what they call as dignity of Persian, dynasty or Persian background. So they improved their connections with them, but they had less religious connections. On the other hand, we have during Pahlavi dynasty reformist tafsir writing. Many people were impressed by Tafsir Muhammad Abdul Rashid Riza. Tafsir Tantawi Jawhari was translated into Persian at that time. So they became interested in reformist, such sort of modern tafsir, so-called modernist tafsirs. And then on the other hand, they became interested in translation from Arabic and Urdu. For example, they translated the works of Ahmed Khan, Sir Ahmed Khan into Persian, or they translated the works of Tantawi Jawhari, the works of Muhammad Abdul. Some parts of Rashid Riza's works were translated into Persian at that time. And also they became interested in editing classical tafsirs like that of Tabari, and other famous classical commentators became very popular at that time to be editing new versions of them. And so this was the main reason that we have less tafsiri connection between Pahlavi dynasty and the Malay-Indonesian world. But after the revolution, everything had changed. After the Iranian Revolution, and what happened? So Iranians, developed their relationship with the Malay-Indonesian world in general, and with Indonesia in particular. They founded centers in Indonesia and Jakarta, and also they accepted many students to their, Hausa students, and they studied in Qom. Some of them studied in Tehran, and they get back to Indonesia. They became interested in Persian tafsirs. Another thing that they've done is that they reviving Safavid tafsir, or Safavid understanding of the Qur'an. So one of them is the works of Mullah Sadra, became very popular, like Tafsir Surah Nur. You can see this is a recent thesis just defended in Indonesia, which was impressed by philosophical or metaphysical understanding of Qur'an by Mullah Sadra, became very popular in Malay-Indonesian world. Also, they translated Tafsir al-Mizan by Muhammad Hussein Tabatabai, which is very popular. It still is one of the backbones of tafsir literature in Indonesian circles also. And after that, they translated the works of famous Ayatollah Makarim Shirazi, whose work was translated into Indonesian, still read, many theses write about that one. And more importantly, these works are cited by modern commentators like that of Quraysh, which is still controversial. Many people wanted to know why he cited, for example, Tafsir al-Mizan in the 15th volume, I think, of his work. That was a big question why he really referred, whether he was Shi'i or was not a Shi'i. Indeed, tafsir after the revolution became an instrument or vehicle for even politicians or the people who wanted to play with politics to define what sort of sectarian relationship you have with Iran or not. Yeah, this is all the story of Malay-Indonesian tafsirs and Persian Shi'ism that I wanted to present. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So maybe you could stop sharing your slide now. Yeah, great. So thank you very much, Majid. There were a lot of thought-provoking ideas and findings. And there's also been a bit of a discussion in the chat on the definition of Shi'i tafsir and its connection to Iranian identity. But before we get to questions from the audience, I would very much like to ask Peter to comment on your talk.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Johanna. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Look, thank you, and Majid, thank you for a fascinating report, conversation on your research underway. Obviously, this is potentially a huge enterprise. This could well be a book. You're spanning from the introductory period where you discuss the very early Persian period, the early Persian Shiite tafsir, right through to the 20th century. So there are a number of different points of focus that we could take, and I'm going to focus on just a couple of that broad timeline. Obviously, my interests, what I've written about, and I'm especially fascinated by the early period, and your work on that Leiden manuscript, which is interlinear with 3 levels, 3 lines. I think this is potentially, it's dynamite, really, in terms of not only, for all sorts of reasons. Firstly, you're talking about a manuscript that you believe to date from the 16th century. So in terms of the age of Southeast Asian manuscripts, that places it among the very oldest surviving manuscripts from the region. So one question I would want to throw you in your direction for you to address after I finish talking is how confident are you of that 16th century date, and perhaps you could unpack the dating process a little bit more. In terms of that manuscript, again, I think I heard you say that the Malay line is a rendering of the Persian line rather than of the Arabic original. So again, perhaps if you could clarify that as well. Again, I like so many scholars of Islam, I've tended to focus much more on the Sunni world. So I learnt a lot from your talk, and I really appreciated that. And your conclusion that the Persianate world extends beyond South India and Sri Lanka to incorporate Southeast Asia again is groundbreaking, I think, and obviously that's something that you'll do more work on to justify. I guess a question I would have, and this is a question out of ignorance really, is that how much evidence does there need to be of Persian literary activity for a region of the world to be considered a Persianate region? It sounds to me like the remnants of Persian writing, fascinating though they be, are fairly fragmentary. So how much do we need to say, well, Aceh is really Persianate, or part of the Persianate world? Another question, an obvious question that I was asked about the Cambridge tafsir on Surat al-Kahf is that I would obviously ask you the same question with regard to the Leiden manuscript is, why is there only one remaining manuscript of your work in Leiden? I think I heard you also mention that you're proposing that this work circulated through South India as well. I'd be interested to hear more about that. But does the fact of there only being one surviving copy of this manuscript, and it's in Europe, point to the ravages of Araniri, as I was proposing for the Cambridge tafsir? So let me just leave that early period. We could talk, and we will talk much more on that, no doubt. Only to add, by the way, that I really appreciated your suggestion that some of the Cambridge tafsir that I did not identify with a particular work may be linked up with Tafsir Hosseini by Al-Kashifi. That's very interesting, and I'd certainly look forward to seeing more work on that, that link being drawn out. Right through the period, I think that middle period of silence in terms of Persian literary work, of course, it echoes, it harks back to some of my own earlier claims about a period of silence of tafsir generally in Southeast Asia, which is now being challenged very interestingly by others. In the modern period, your discussion, I think, of the rendering beyond the Pahlavi period, more into the post-revolutionary period, of course. I noted that you said that the Islamic Republic, as part of its effectively da'wah, I suppose, has been reviving Safavid tafsirs. And looking back at your original table, I found it rather curious and noticeable that the periods where the dominant regime only focused on Shi'i works were the modern period and the Safavid period. So in a sense, it's resurrecting narrowness, as I understand it. But look, the controversy that surrounds the expansion of the presence of revolutionary Iranian literature in Southeast Asia is very interesting, well worth developing in your work. I could go on, but look, I won't go on any longer. Just I'd commend you on what you're doing. It's a big project. I sense that you're obviously, you've done a lot more work on some parts of it than on other parts, which is entirely normal, of course. But well done, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, Majid, maybe you can answer to Peter's questions briefly before I end the recording, and then I'll give the audience a chance to ask questions.
Thank you, Johanna. Thank you, Peter, for such great feedback. And so let's answer your questions. So those are, I have prepared myself better for those questions. As you said about the Leiden manuscript. So it was collected by Snook in the 19th century, and he brought them to Malay-Indonesian world, and we do not know why it is only one manuscript is available. But what I found, and this, I hope I got time to publish, but I found plenty Malay manuscripts similar to this one in Iranian libraries, which were wrongly introduced with the language of Jordai, which were not introduced as a Malay language. So I recently found some, so I hope I can, write more about them. But yeah, we have only one copy of this manuscript from Aceh. and we do not know why only one. But absolutely, it was not viewed as a Persian as a tafsir. It was viewed as a anthology of poems, including commentaries on the Qur'an. And it was already popular in India because Fakhruddin al-Razi's works were widely circulated in that region. And they were, so many Malays visited India, and so they brought many things to their own lands. And about the Persianate that you said, how we can prove that Persianate can be a part of Persianate world. I think we have many sources. Apart from such interlinear translations, there are many Persian materials like hikayat, which were clearly translated based on Persian sources, producing in Afghanistan. I mean, these days Afghanistan or in India or even in Iran, they were translated directly from him. And I already published about Hikayat Muhammad Hanafiya, with what is the origin of Hikayat Muhammad Hanafiya, and I think other stories. And in some manuscript, we have the name of Aceh. We have the name of specific figures who were already active in Aceh at that time. And they wrote about, they translated such a stuff into Malay. And I can answer.
Could you maybe say something about Peter's question about the dating of the Leiden manuscript?
Oh, thank you, yes.
The dating, 16th century, which seems very early.
The manuscript is undated, but according to the quality of the paper, as well as the orthography, the style of orthography tell us that the Javi language is the old Malay, is not the modern Malay. So according to the style of, I clearly mentioned it in my article. And even Bauzani mentioned this one, that this manuscript tell us about the old Malay, old Javi, which belongs to before the 17th century. So it was not popular after the 17th century. This is our idea that it's gonna be 16th century and probably early 17th century. But my impression is that it's gonna be 16th century, and this is what also Bauzani mentions, and mainly due to the orthography, which is presents the old form of Malay, not the modern one.
Okay, thank you so much, Majid. Thank you, Peter. I will end the recording now, and then I will give our guests an opportunity to ask questions either in the chat or just signal if you want to ask